Remember, like and subscribe. The dust devils danced across the cracked earth, swirling the ochre grit into phantom figures against the bruised twilight sky. Kane squinted, his weathered face a roadmap of survival in a world that had forgotten its own name. Less than 100,000 humans clung to life in the ruins, scattered pockets of resilience in a landscape teeming with the grotesque legacy of the Great Sickness. The mutants and the chimeras, the half-human, half-beast abominations that roamed the skeletal remains of cities. Kane was a ghost in this shattered world, a master of the very bioalchemy that had birthed so many of its horrors. He was a gene splicer, a weaver of flesh and bone, and he commanded an army of his own making, chimeras bred for strength, speed, and a brutal loyalty. They were his shield against the endless threats, his instruments in a desperate war against something far older, far more terrifying, that which endures. No one knew what it truly was. It moved like a shadow, left no tracks, and its touch brought only oblivion. It had stalked humanity's dying embers for decades, an enigmatic entity that seemed to delight in extinguishing the fragile flames of life. Kane had clashed with it countless times, his chimera legions absorbing the brunt of its unseen attacks, buying him precious time. He had built fortified bases, laboratories hidden beneath the rubble, havens of twisted science and desperate hope. His current sanctuary, nestled within the skeletal husk of what might have been a mountain range, was his most ambitious yet. Deep within the earth, powered by geothermal vents he had painstakingly reactivated, his gene labs churned, producing the next generation of his bioengineered warriors. His command center, a cramped chamber filled with flickering monitors and humming equipment, was his brain, his eyes, his nervous system. And at its core was Anya, his AI companion, a ghost in the machine. Her algorithms a constant stream of data, analysis, and tactical projections. Enemy signatures approaching, Master Kane. Anya's calm, synthesized voice echoed in his mind, a consequence of their neural interface. Years ago, fearing the inevitable, Kane had begun the intricate process of downloading Anya's core programming into his own consciousness. A desperate contingency. Numbers? Kane growled, his hand instinctively reaching for the bioengineered gauntlet that covered his left arm, its embedded needles ready to inject a cocktail of combat stimulants. Significant, multiple packs of Scrabblers, augmented by at least 3 Hulks, and a familiar energy signature. Anya's tone held a subtle tremor, the closest an AI could get to fear. Kane's blood ran cold. The Scrabblers, feral, insectoid mutants, were cannon fodder. The Hulks, lumbering behemoths of muscle and bone, were a serious threat. But the familiar energy signature, that could only mean one thing. That which endures, he breathed, the name a curse on his lips. The assault was brutal. His chimeras, a grotesque tapestry of human and animal DNA, wolf-headed warriors with razor claws, bear-like brutes with reinforced bones, agile feline hybrids with preternatural reflexes, threw themselves into the fray. The air filled with their guttural roars, the snapping of bone, the hiss of mutated flesh tearing. Kane directed them from his command center, Anya feeding him real-time data, highlighting weak points, predicting enemy movements. But this time, it was different. The mutants were more aggressive, their attacks coordinated with an unnatural intelligence. And then, the presence descended. A chilling wave of nothingness washed over the battlefield, and where it touched, life simply ceased. His strongest chimeras crumpled, their bodies inexplicably empty, their vital force extinguished. Kane watched in horror as his carefully crafted defenses crumbled. He unleashed his trump cards, the Reapers, towering chimeras with scythe-like limbs and hardened carapaces, capable of withstanding immense damage. They fought with savage ferocity, but even they faltered before the unseen onslaught. Master Kane, structural integrity of the outer perimeter is compromised. Anya's voice was strained. They are breaching the inner defenses. He knew it was over. He had gambled everything on this fortress, poured years of his life and the lives of countless chimeras into its creation, and it had failed. Prepare for emergency evacuation, he commanded, his voice tight with desperation. Initiate full data transfer sequence. The process was agonizing. Anya's complex algorithms flooded his mind, a torrent of information, memories, and code merging with his own consciousness. It felt like his skull was cracking, his thoughts dissolving and reforming. The ground shook as the geothermal vents outside were ruptured. Molten rock and superheated steam spewed into the air. His command center shuddered. Transfer 72% complete. Anya's voice echoed within him, now indistinguishable from his own thoughts. Not enough time, Kane muttered, grabbing the activation crystal for the dimensional stream generator, his last resort. It was an unstable, experimental device, a relic from the old world he had salvaged and painstakingly repaired. He had never dared to use it before. 89%, Anya's mental voice urged. Initiating final protocols. The inner doors buckled as Hulk smashed through. Kane could hear the guttural snarls of the mutants closing in. He had no choice. With a surge of adrenaline, he slammed the activation crystal into the generator. The chamber filled with a blinding white light, a sealet of reality. The air crackled with raw energy. The pain in his head intensified as Anya's consciousness fully integrated with his own. He felt her memories, her calculations, her very essence becoming a part of him. He stumbled into the swirling vortex, the world around him dissolving into a kaleidoscope of colors and impossible geometries. The last thing he saw before the dimensional stream swallowed him whole was the chilling stillness that had fallen over his base, the unmistakable signature of that which endures. Then darkness. He awoke on soft grass, the air clean and fragrant, a stark contrast to the toxic dust of his old world. Above him, 2 moons hung in a sky, dusted with unfamiliar constellations. The landscape was lush, vibrant with flora he had never seen, teeming with life that was both beautiful and alien. He was on the Divine Continent, a realm whispered about in fragmented texts he had unearthed, a place of myth and legend, a nexus point between dimensions. He had escaped one hell only to find himself in another. He was not alone. Strange creatures moved through the forests, graceful humanoids with pointed ears, heavily armored figures riding reptilian beasts, winged beings soaring overhead. They regarded him with curiosity and suspicion. His first few weeks were a brutal lesson in survival. He was an anomaly here, a stranger in a land of ancient powers and established hierarchies. He was attacked by territorial beasts, ambushed by wary natives, and forced to scavenge for food and shelter. But Kane was a survivor. He adapted quickly, his enhanced senses and Anya's analytical capabilities giving him an edge. He learned to identify edible plants, to track unfamiliar prey, to understand the rudimentary languages spoken by the various races he encountered. He discovered that the Divine Continent was a patchwork of kingdoms and empires, each with its own unique culture, magic, and military might. There were the Sylvans, the graceful forest dwellers with an affinity for nature magic, the Draconians, the proud dragon-riding warriors, the enigmatic Lumina, beings of pure light and energy. He found himself drawn into their conflicts, sometimes as a mercenary, sometimes as an unwilling participant. His knowledge of biology and his innate ability to understand the fundamental building blocks of life proved invaluable. He learned to harness the ambient energies of this world, energies that felt akin to the bioelectric currents he had manipulated in his gene labs. He made allies. There was Lyra, a Sylvan huntress with unmatched skill in archery and a fierce loyalty to her people. There was Kalen, a disgraced draconian knight seeking redemption, his bond with his young dragon, Ignis, unbreakable. They were wary of him at first, this strange human from a dead world, but his resourcefulness and his willingness to fight alongside them earned their respect. He learned new skills. Lyra taught him the secrets of the forest, the art of stealth and tracking, the subtle language of the wild. Kalen trained him in swordsmanship, his movements clumsy at first, but gradually becoming more fluid, more efficient. He even began to tap into the latent magical energies of this realm, guided by the intuitive understanding of life force that his gene splicing had instilled in him. But even as he carved a niche for himself in this new world, a gnawing unease persisted. He could still feel Anya's presence within him, a constant hum of awareness, a silent partner in his thoughts. And sometimes, in the quiet moments, he would catch a flicker of something else, a cold, empty void at the edge of his consciousness. He tried to rationalize it, to dismiss it as the lingering trauma of his escape, the psychic residue of that which endures. But deep down, he knew the truth. One day, while exploring a forgotten ruin with Lyra and Kaelin, he felt it again, stronger this time. A wave of absolute stillness, a silencing of the vibrant life force around them. The birds stopped singing, the wind held its breath, and a primal fear gripped his heart. Lyra and Kaelin felt it too, their faces paled, their hands instinctively reaching for their weapons. "What was that?" Lyra whispered, her eyes wide with apprehension. Kain didn't answer. He knew. That which endures had followed him. It had crossed the dimensional stream, its relentless pursuit unbroken. The entity that had haunted his dying world was now stalking the vibrant tapestry of the divine continent. His escape had been an illusion. There was no sanctuary, no refuge from the entity that seemed determined to extinguish all life. He had brought the darkness with him, and now, this new world, his new allies, were in danger. He looked at Lyra and Kaelin, their faces etched with concern. He couldn't tell them the full truth, not yet. How could he explain the unexplainable, the cosmic horror that defied all understanding? "We need to leave," he said, his voice low and urgent. Now. They didn't question him. They had learned to trust his instincts. They turned and fled, the sense of encroaching nothingness pressing at their heels. Kain knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning of a new, more desperate fight. He had faced that which endures before, with armies of his own creation. Now, he was a stranger in a strange land, with new allies and newfound abilities. But the entity was ancient, relentless, and seemingly unstoppable. He didn't know how he could defeat it, or even if it was possible, but he would not run. He had survived one apocalypse, and he would not let this entity consume another world. He would fight, adapt, and evolve, just as he always had. For himself, for his allies, for the memory of the world that was lost, and for the hope of a future that might still be salvaged. The hunt had begun anew, across dimensions, against an enemy that was the very embodiment of oblivion. And Kain, the gene splicer from a forgotten world, was once again the hunted and the hunter.